Okay. 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 So what do I do now? Am I live? I don't know if I'm live. Oh, okay.
This is on mute.
Good morning. Confirm you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Good morning and welcome to the panel one, Light Up Africa. And we would have our moderator, our very own Patricia Simon Hatt, the MD of AFREG. Patricia, please, can you have over to you?
I don't think we have everybody yet. We're waiting.
Okay.
Yes. So we're waiting.
Okay.
Okay, Dolapo's on, Adepoju is on, Chizzy is on. One more person. I think we're waiting for Mrs. Azogu. One.
Okay.
I think we can start. So good morning. While we wait for her, should we wait for her or we should just start?
I think we can start with what we have, then she's going to join us as we ride along.
Wonderful. I think she wanted to know, because we're running behind schedule, she wanted to know when we're back. So I think
Good morning, all. Good morning.
Are you on?
Yes, I'm on. Thank you. Sorry, I've been trying to enter the system since the past 40 minutes. In fact, almost 1 hour, really. But thank God that finally.
So sorry about that. So sorry. Welcome. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to start now. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first panel session of the day. Our topic this morning is Lighting Up Africa, ensuring increased energy access in Nigeria and the role of women. So our focus is going to cover enablers to increase energy access across Nigeria. We should also be looking at policies, regulation, and other things that are required in the sector. We're also going to be considering some gender issues and how to overcome the obstacles and barriers to entry to try and increase female participation in the sector. And today we're fortunate to have such an experienced panel before us, and also a diverse panel in terms of experience as well. So I'd like to start by introducing the panelists, and then I'll go on to set the context for our conversation this morning. So let me start by introducing Adepeju Adebajo. She is the CEO of Lumos Nigeria. She is a senior business executive with over 30 years of experience. 13 of those years have been in CEO positions. She also served as an honorable commissioner for agriculture in Ogun State. Peju has a BSc and an MSc in chemical engineering from Imperial College London, and she has an MBA from Harvard Business School, Cambridge, Massachusetts. In 2013, she received the HBS Nigeria Leadership Award, and in 2015, she was the recipient of CNBC's Africa Business Woman of the Year Award. So great CV there. She's very welcome. So Peju, you're very welcome to the session. We're looking forward to your perspective on the topic today. Next, I'm going to introduce you to Mrs. Callista Azogu. Mrs. Azogu is currently the Deputy Managing Director as well as the General Manager of Human Resources for Nigerian Ajib Oil Company Limited. She's worked in various positions in the E&I group globally since she joined them in 1996. Including being the Nigerian content manager for AGIP. Her background is in accounting and finance, and she is an associate chartered accountant in 1990. She is a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, 2005. She's also a fellow of the West African Society of Communication and Administration, a fellow of the Institute of Corporate Administration of Nigeria, a member of the Chartered Institute of Personal Management of Nigeria, amongst many others. So you can see she has such a robust CV there. Mrs. Ezogu obtained her first degree in 1985 and a master's in 1989 from the University of Ilorin, and she is the first female. She's the first female to hold the position of general manager. She's breaking those glass ceilings in human resources and organization for AGIP, and this is the first in 58 years of the existence of AGIP Nigeria, and I think she deserves a digital or a cyber a round of applause here. Yes, she does. She won the award for the first Nigerian Content Operator of the Year for AGIP, and also the PETAN Chairman's Outstanding Achievement Recognition Award for Nigeria in 2015. So also driving local content, amazing. Thank you very much. It's great to have you on board, Mrs. Ezogu. We're looking forward to your also your perspective on the topic. Next, we have Mr. Chike Wosu, and thank you, Mr. Chike. You're the only man on the panel. You're going to bring diversity to this conversation today, so we're looking forward to your perspective, not just women all the way. Mr. Chike was appointed Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Walter Smith and Director of the Board of Walter Smith Petroman Oil Limited and Walter Smith Refining and Petrochemical Company in late 2019. He's an experienced senior executive, also with over 30 years of experience of local and international experience in the oil and gas industry. He's demonstrated expertise in management of upstream oil and gas projects, new business development, divestments, acquisitions, midstream gas and downstream refining. And he also delivered Nigeria's first modular refinery amidst the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. Definitely a round of applause is really in order for you as well. So before joining Walter Smith, Chikeze worked with leading international oil and gas companies, including Shell BV in the Netherlands and Sinopec ADEX, where he was also appointed acting deputy managing director. I'm trying to really even compress this, his CV, because there's a lot more there. And if you go online, I'm sure you'll see it. He's a graduate of the University of Nigeria, Ife, in nuclear engineering science, and he holds an MSc with distinction in physics from Ahmadu Bello University. He's a member of several professional bodies, including SPE and NAPE. And he's also currently on the advisory council for the Nelson Mandela Institute's Africa University Science and Technology, AUST, Abuja. So thank you so much for being part of this panel, Chikeze. It's great to have you here. And last but definitely not the least, we have Dolapo Okukoyi, and she's a partner at Detail Law Firm. She leads the firm's power practice. She's one of the leading lawyers in Nigeria's power sector. Her transactional experience includes advising the central bank and advising the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, on intervention funds. And she's also advised other clients on privatization of PHCN and the National Integrated Power Project. And she's also led other state initiatives such as the Lagos State Light Up Lagos Project. She's also drafted regulations for NERC and NESP. Dolapo has earned a law degree from the University of Ibadan in 2001. She holds a diploma in intellectual property law from International Bar Association and College of Law in England and Wales. She serves on climate change thematic groups for the Sustainable Policy Commission of the Nigerian Economic Summit, and also an advisory board member of the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. You're so welcome, and it's great to have you here, Dolapo. I know you're going to bring a lot of energy to this conversation, so we're looking forward. So our topic again is Light Up Africa, and I hope I'm going to open the session by setting the context for our conversation today. So I'm going to start off with a quote from the president of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina. And he said, "Africa is simply tired of being in the dark. It is time to take decisive action and turn around the narrative to light up and power Africa and accelerate the pace of economic transformation, unlock the potential of businesses, and drive much needed industrialization to create jobs." So you can see it's a call to action. Decisive action is what is required, and hopefully by the end of this session, we would have articulated at least some of what is needed, the action needed to drive and light up Africa. When this topic is raised in conversations, I was going to project some slides, but technically it might not be possible. What comes to mind are the images, some images. The images usually that are projected are images of rural communities that require off-grid power or solar solutions to light up a bulb or light up or charge some phone, or maybe clean energy solutions for cooking. But what are the real challenges of power, so that we can become productive, so we can actually industrialize. We don't usually see those big pictures of huge industrial parks or huge industrial cities or the real power that we need. And I think it's very important for us to be able to define the power demands of Africa, and then we can look for the right solutions, because if our power demand is only lighting the bulb in the rural area, then we might have the wrong solutions to really power up and industrialize Nigeria and industrialize Africa in general. So we need to unlock, apart from that, we also need to unlock the enormous power of SMEs and turn even some of the SMEs into medium-sized to large companies. So today I want us to choose to challenge this stereotypical image that we have of Africa's demand for power and the solution to this power crisis. So we need to change our mindset. So the truth of the matter is over 640 million Africans do not have access to energy. It's the lowest in the world, the energy access rate. Also, if we want to put that really into perspective, in Africa, excluding South Africa, or in sub-Saharan Africa, excluding South Africa, the per capita consumption of power is 180 kilowatt hours. And that is compared to Europe, which is 6,500 kilowatt hours per capita. And in the United States, it's 13,000 kilowatt hour per capita. So you can just see the disparity and how much power is needed for development and poverty reduction. Now, in the midst of all this, still trying to set the context here, in the midst of all this, comes the Paris 2015 Paris Climate Agreement that has set the stage to reduce carbon emissions, and Nigeria has signed up to that. So countries are now facing challenges to reduce CO2 emissions, and they're transitioning to renewables. So that's going on. In the past year, we've seen the IOCs in particular aligning, and they've been addressing these SDGs, taking bold policy direction, bold policy statements, and targeted action plans toward 2050. So we're actually witnessing a change in the rhetoric in this industry. At the same time, as we've heard from most of our speakers, the gender gap remains. The energy sector is the worst globally when it comes to gender diversity. And even though we've tried to promote it, we still have these issues. So that's the context. So let's get this conversation started. And I'm going to start out by asking Mr. Wilson to share his perspective on the bold actions that should be taken, that we need to take to light up Africa. So over to you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And I'm quite happy to be here. And I'll try and, I wanted to share something on my screen, but I don't think that's possible at the moment here. It's a little image of Africa at night. Well, actually the world at night. And it shows how dark Africa is. Remember, Africa has always been called the dark continent. And the statistics and the numbers that you've just reeled out in terms of energy consumption, if I show that picture which speaks a million words, not just 1,000 words, you'll then understand how dark the continent of Africa remains. Now, when you talk about, or when we talk about all the issues around the transition, the energy transition to cleaner energy and renewables, I can tell you, first of all, that the per capita emissions from Africa are the lowest in the world. In actual fact, factors of 100, if not more, when compared to the higher emitting countries like China and Europe and the United States of America. So it's important for Africa to realize that we haven't managed to consume the amount of energy that we require to consume. And therefore, the first thing that Africa needs to do, I keep saying that this is almost a mantra with me, is about consuming. We need to start consuming the God-given resources of energy, whether it be fossil fuels, which are still part of the energy mix, or whether it's renewables like wind and solar, which are very predominant, in terms of natural resources in Africa. Now, but we have to keep an eye on this energy transition as well. And so it's quite important for us to understand that the fossil fuel that will help us with the transition to clean energy is gas. Yeah. Therefore, when the Honorable Minister of State and the GMD and MPC talk about the year of gas, that's actually what we need to do. We need to start cleaning up the fossil fuels by going through gas as a transition energy, and we have 200 TCF of gas or more, which are discovered, and about 600 TCF, according to certain studies, which are prospective resources. So there's a lot of energy there available for us to do the transition. And when we transit, we will still have to maintain some kind of balance between gas and the renewables, whether it be solar or wind. Now, that's about the transition that has to happen. The other part is about the role women have to play. And you're perfectly right. If you look at the percentage of women who are in the energy industry, the fossil fuel energy industry, I think it's about 22%. So they are grossly underrepresented in the energy industry. And 22% is when you look at the entire workforce. As you progress towards senior management, C-suite and CEOs, you get percentages that are ridiculous, quite honestly. However, there's a slight advantage in going into renewables. I understand that the work done by the International Renewable Energy Association has shown that women in renewables now account for about 32%. So there's a 10% differential in the workforce for renewables. So women have already taken a note of the changes that are happening and have positioned themselves to take advantage of the renewable space. But there are a lot of things that need to happen. And maybe in the course of these discussions, we'll mention some actions that need to be taken, whether it be in terms of gender mainstreaming, which is very critical to make sure that we focus on getting all the information possible and provide all the deliberate actions to make sure that women participate in this transition to renewable energy more than they've participated in the fossil fuel industry. And I can go on, but let me just pause for the moment and hand back to you and we'll have the discussion as we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was great. We don't have much time, so I'm not going to summarize what each of the panelists are saying. So I hope you're taking notes as they're speaking, because I'm not going to summarize. No time. There's a lot to talk about. So I'm going to hand over now to Mrs. Azogu, and if you could kindly give us your viewpoint on the topic in a brief, like 3 to 5 minutes. Mrs. Azogu, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat. I hope you can hear me, yes?
Very clearly, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. I think first and foremost, I want to thank the organizers for the opportunity to speak at this wonderful gathering. I think that Mr. Chikenwosu said something that is really very clear. The fact that now there is the concentration in the area of neutral or carbon neutral energy. In other words, the whole world is beginning to direct attention to energy that is clean. And for us, we know that here in Nigeria, and maybe even the rest of the world in the past, have been concentrating on more of crude oil. Well, coal was the first. So we do know that those are really energy that are not good for our environment. And it is our responsibility, a very key responsibility, to ensure that the environment is in the form that humans and other living organisms can still survive and have a future. So for sure, gas is a much cleaner energy than crude oil, coal, and thereabout. So I think that for Nigeria and for Africa, we need to begin to think more about gas while we continue to form the mainstream of the future that is now being directed towards cleaner, much cleaner energy. Nigeria is actually known as a gas country, so we do have a lot of gas resources, yet gas potentials yet to be utilized. And I think that if we begin to concentrate in this area, we will make great progress. Now we are looking at the usage of power. Usage of power. We are saying that we don't have power, or we don't generate enough. Nigeria, and I think in Africa as well, this is the giant of Africa, does not generate enough power to drive its own economic growth and industrialization. Even if this giant is blessed with the best of all the natural resources, both the resources in fossils and the carbon neutral ones. How do we consume more power if we don't even have it to consume? I think that these are very key questions that we need to ask ourselves. We need to begin to direct ourselves towards more serious actions than talking. I think a lot of talking has been done, and we all know what to do. Well, the aspect of women involvement, for me, is a very passionate area, because we do know that the population, the majority of the population is made up of women. And we know that women are so wonderful. They have great potential for administration, in administration. Women have demonstrated that, honestly, if they are not part of a team, the team is incomplete. The reason is because God made men and women differently. The way men think are different. The way women think are different. And if you complete those thoughts and the viewpoints, then you have a complete team. Women are so wonderful and very good in administration. Yet, in the policy-making bodies and structures of the country, they are in the minority. So I think that to have what you call a concrete industrialization, we need to bring on board more women in policy-making and at the right places. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kalisa. That was a great introduction. Indeed, we need women to make policies that for women, to include women in general. And we're losing a lot in terms of the assets and the potential of women there. So thank you so much for your own perception. Next, I'm going to go on to ask Mrs. Adepeju Adebajo to give us her own introduction or introductory remarks.
Thank you very much, Pat. Wonderful to be here. It's a great platform. I won't repeat what my fellow panelists have said, but just to note that what we need in Nigeria is an energy roadmap. It's not necessarily A or B or C or D. It's going to be a combination of all of the above, because there are places where, for example, it makes sense to use solar energy, especially when you're talking about the last mile and when you're talking about areas that need decentralized solutions, and other places where it might make sense to use other forms of energy. Certainly, our usage of gas gas has huge potential in Nigeria, and so far it is underutilized. But I think we need to come up with an energy roadmap, something which is coordinated at the central level. Second, we must also remember that realistically, we are where we are in terms of the economy and our ability to fund closing the energy gap. And many international players are simply refusing to fund fossil fuel-based businesses. So yes, we didn't consume as much as we should have consumed, but we need to be realistic about where the money is coming from. And the truth of the matter is that a lot of money is going into clean energy and renewable energy. Now, Nigeria happens to be blessed with plenty of sun, and the wind and gas. And so I think we need to be realistic as to what would make sense for the country going forward. Now, to speak to a comment that was made earlier about the stereotypes, unfortunately, those stereotypes are somewhat deserved, because this is a country where 80 million people are in poverty. And of that 80 million, 70% of them are women. And although we have an ambition to lift 100 million people out of poverty in the next 10 years, the fact of the matter is that if 70% of the poor people are women, and women also happen to be many of those who man the micro enterprises who are really the engine of growth for the economy, and we must look at those micro solutions which one can very quickly bring them the ability. And I agree that we should not be poor in our ambitions where we're only aiming at light bulbs, but we need to be able to get them those sources of energy and power, which would at least enable them have productive use so that they can, power their small businesses and help the economy to grow. So certainly in an industry where, in a situation whereby in terms of the economy, women are actually the greatest victims of not having access to power, then it just stands to reason that women should be part of the solution. And by the way, as we all know, diversity and inclusion is good business, whether it is in the energy industry or any other industry. And so it simply makes sense that we must create pathways for women through education in STEM to ensuring that those women actually enter the workplace, and we create pathways to leadership and to the C-suite and the boardroom, where indeed they'll be part of policy and decision-making.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. So we're hearing the same kind of things. We're hearing this energy mix that's needed. Look at all sources of energy. We're hearing we need more women in policy making and decision making. There are micro solutions. We just need to move women out of poverty and people out of poverty in general. So more power in all ramifications. Great perspective there. We're now going to go on to Dolapo Okukoyi, and she's going to give us her own angle on this topic. She comes from a policy, regulatory side of things, and she can give us her perspective from the policy regulation, as well as she's had some involvement in PPP. So over to you, Dolapo, for your own perspective. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to Rian and to the Women in Energy Network for this opportunity. It's great to be here. I think that the panelists have said a lot of what I would have thought of, using that starting with opening remarks. I think that I would just be reiterating some things and then, speaking to some parts of the policy. I'd like to start with a quote. I found a very profound quote a few weeks ago that I thought is very apt for this topic. And it's a quote that was made by the former Secretary General for the UN, Ban Ki-moon. And he says that energy is the golden thread that connects economic growth, social equity, and environmental sustainability. I thought it was so apt that this single thing called energy, and I think that Mrs. Adebayo was so spot on, as to what she said about the fact that I'll talk about the connection with women. This single thing called energy is one thing that spins off into so much that Africa needs: economic growth, social equity, which includes the role of women, which includes making our societies more inclusive in a country where poverty is a big issue, in a country where poverty and inequality is a big issue. And when we talk about economic growth, industrialization is also part of it, and then environmental sustainability. And if we hone in on Nigeria, it's obvious that what we are experiencing is the opposite side of what we should be experiencing if we have energy. I mean, our energy access levels from C4All data as at 2016 says that we had 186 million people and access levels of about 59.3%. Even though that seems high, the 59.3% are mostly in urban areas and they are underserved. So when this says energy access, it is that there are wires and there are poles and there are connections, but that they have 24-hour power is not there. They are underserved, this number. But then going into the role of women. Women are, and I'll go to Mr. Adebayo's point, women are the most affected by these issues, by the opposite, which we don't have, which is economic growth. They are the victims of the lack of economic growth. They are the victims of the lack of social equity. They are the victims, of environmental sustainability. And why do I say that? Because women are the primary energy givers and carers in every family. Whether it is at the very basest levels of cooking, or whether it is enabling your child being able to read, or whether it is doing that petty trade that enables your children sometimes go to school, at the very basic level. Women play that role. And it only stands to reason that if they are so affected by the lack of energy, they should have a role. And they are proper, not only that they should have a role, it's not even an entitlement, is that they are properly placed to appreciate what it is to have energy access. So it just appears to be a no-brainer that we have women play those roles. I will just touch a little bit on, from a government policy perspective, how this can happen. And it has to be a deliberate effort. It's not the smatterings of women on boards and women in government agencies that does it. It has to be a deliberate policy and a collaborative policy effort, actually, of both the public and the private sector. I was reading about in the US how, I don't know if this bill has been passed, but this was an article in 2020, how the private sector and government is coming together to put in a bill for some kind of action plan to increase, diversity. So it has to be something that we do to build a pipeline. So when we are talking about quotas, it's not just establishing quotas and making sure you have one woman on your board. It is building a pipeline from school, from education, where we have more women. I thought that Hajia's speech was fantastic, and it was just where the girl child, is educated one and is exposed to STEM and gets interested in STEM and then gets into the workplace and is encouraged to go through into C-suite and into boards. That we have a community of women who continually feed that. So it's not about just getting the smatterings of women, it's growing the pipeline. Yeah. I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Laba. You bring so much energy to the conversation. Thank you. And so right, we need to start at the grassroots. We need to start, with the young ones and bring them in and have that continuous flow. Thank you so much for that. We're now going to go into questions, and I'd like to encourage the audience, if you have any questions for this amazing panel, please try and post the questions. I'm trying to go between the two platforms we have here, because on the Zoom platform, and then there's the other platform. So if there are any questions, I hope Chioma and Anita, if you can pick them up from the participants, if you can just pick up those questions. In the meantime, I'm going to start with some questions. If there are any questions, just let me know, because I don't seem to be able to see any on my side. So if you're seeing any, please let us know. So I'm going to start off with back to Mr. Wosu again. I'm going to ask you, how are we going to manage the balance between reducing these carbon emissions, while at the same time providing power for industrial growth? How are we going to cope?
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I think, if I'm not incorrect, Adekbeju tried to say something along those lines in terms of energy mix. So you're right. If you present a case to any funding parties nowadays that is only around oil, you're going to have a challenge getting the funding for those kind of projects. So, I'll give you a practical example from my own company. So we do have a strategy for an energy mix. And I think it's both what the country needs to do, well, the continent, the countries in the continent, Nigeria especially, and even the individual companies. I'm not too worried about the international oil companies, because the pressure is on them, immense pressure. But you must have an energy mix that is apparent to anybody who's coming to fund projects in your country or your company, showing that you are planning a transition. So to use Walter Smith as an example very clearly, we are mostly in oil at this time, including our upstream business and our refining business. But we already have purchased a gas license, gas to power, 300 megawatts. And at the same time, we're progressing a 1,000 megawatt renewable energy project with UNIDO and UNECA. So note, it's important that you have also international partners who are part of this, because what they do is they enforce some discipline in your delivering on that strategy. So our transition is from oil to the cleaner fossil fuel, which is gas, 300 megawatts of energy, to 1,000 megawatts of renewable energy, mostly solar that we're targeting. And we're partnering with these international organizations. So when we go to funding parties and we're talking about the funds we need, it is clear to us that the oil business is going to drive the rest of it. That's our first business, the upstream oil business. So when they invest in it, the cash flows we get from that, we want to demonstrate that we're going to transit clearly to gas and then renewables. So it's not just to talk about it, it's about putting this energy strategy, this energy mix strategy in your portfolio. So Kweju was right. The country has to do that. I haven't seen that yet. I've seen disparate elements of upstream business, PIB, you have to invest in this, the decade for gas, yeah. Then you have renewable energies. They are discussed as if they are separate elements of the whole picture, but they are all together. And that transition will make sure that there's a linkage. Let me say one thing. At the early stage of the renewable energy, when we get to renewable energy, you will still have to have a fallback to maybe gas. Periodically when wind is not available, yeah, because it's not always available, or solar is not available. So that fallback will be there. And that's why it's important to integrate the entire energy mix across board. Now, if you don't mind my just mentioning a few things, because it's not just about energy it's about women in energy as well. And when I talk about deliberate actions, and I'm happy with what, I can't remember, I think it's Dolakon, if I'm right, said about from cradle to the top. That is what it has to be. So a couple of areas, girls in STEM, this is important, that every single company that is in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, any of those kind of bases, so the science and engineering based kind of disciplines, make sure that they have a dedicated girls in STEM program. We have one. We work with SPE, the Society of Petroleum Engineers, to do that. I would say that WIN should also make sure that part of their program is to search out these companies and make sure that as part of their portfolio, as part of their programs, they have a dedicated girls in STEM. We also have to have data, disaggregated data. It's important. When you talk about women in energy, I'm not even sure that Nigeria, when you talk about the global numbers, I'm not sure that Nigeria actually knows how many women are in energy and at what different levels, whether it's in fossil fuels. So that data is important. That's where the regulatory agencies and government has to come in. And we have to track the progress with that data. We have a setup where we get the data first, and we then make sure that there's a clear roadmap of how we have to deliver that growth by, like I said, the Girls in STEM program, by networking. Women in energy in Nigeria has to create that portfolio to network. And it's not just networking with women, network with leaders, mentorship, coaching, those kind of, have this kind of arrangements with men and women who are in senior positions in energy, and make sure that the target and the focus and the deliberate action is about growing women to take up senior management positions, executive positions, CEO positions as we transit into renewable energy. Thank you very much.
Loads of action points there. I'm sure we're taking note of all these action points that need to be articulated properly. So thank you so much. I'm going to go on to Pedro to ask you, are women positioned to actually lead this transition to cleaner and renewable energy sources? We're always talking about just solar, but you've just heard Chikezie talk about, he's talked about wind energy. I don't even think it's in our purview right now. There's nuclear energy, there are different forms of energy. We're hearing of hydro energy. I mean, there's a whole, gamut of this energy mix. So question, is the space more attractive? Is it more accommodating? I mean, you're in it. Is it more accommodating than fossil fuels? And then what skills do women need? So women are listening now. What skills do they need and what do they require to participate in this renewable space?
So women are better represented in the renewable energy industry than traditional oil and gas. I think it was in Stanwolso that said it, 32% versus 22%. So there's something about the industry that makes it more accommodating. But I think where there's an opportunity is that because it's a relatively new industry, and I'm talking now more about renewable energy, and I am in solar. We're not, as you said, we're not even in wind yet. But because it's a new industry, I think there are lots of opportunities for women to take leadership positions, especially as we've said earlier on. They're the ones who really understand some of the issues associated with the use of the energy. Therefore, they're better placed in terms of innovation, being able to come up with solutions because they are actually the practitioners, if you like, in the industry. And I think because it's a new industry, many of the people who are trying solar for the moment are early adopters. Women really have an opportunity to enter this industry, both as consumers, often in the home. When it comes to the energy, use of energy, women are very often the decision makers. We find that maybe the men actually are the ones who make the purchase, but very often women are the decision makers. There's also room for women in terms of even vocational, and what I think we need to do, apart from quotas, which were mentioned, I think the government must be deliberate. I have no apology for quotas. It was done in the banking industry and it's been successful, and that has spilled over to other industries and companies quoted on the stock exchange. There's no reason why we shouldn't enforce quotas for women in energy. There's no reason why we shouldn't have more deliberate STEM training. There's no reason why we can't have vocational training in the renewable industry, energy industry. There's lots of room for people like installers, people who go about installing and maintaining these systems. Right now, it's traditionally male dominated, but there's absolutely no reason why a woman can't climb a ladder to install a solar system. You know, we have stereotypes in our minds about what women can do. So there's absolutely no reason why we can't. And I think this is a great opportunity to put in place those policies to ensure that women actually do succeed in this very vital industry. It is entirely possible. We just need the political will to do so.
Great. Excellent.
One last thing, I want to mention mentorship, because many of us on this platform, if we're not already mentoring, we should be mentoring, because a lot of girls lack good role models for successful women in STEM. And so we must ensure that we're mentoring those coming behind us. Thanks.
Great point, Peju. That's one of the reasons we set up WIAN, and it's really, really essential that we mentor more women. Choma says there's some questions from the audience, but before that, I'm just going to ask Mrs. Azogu one question. This is on funding, because funding is major. We can see now, especially because of the COVID pandemic and the dual impact we had with the falling oil prices and the oil crisis last year, the oil price crisis last year, we saw a lot of funding moving towards renewables because it's more stable. It's not as it's not as volatile as the oil sector, and we saw a lot of funding moving there. So now we're seeing less funding for oil and gas, or less funding for gas and more for renewables. But I want to ask a question here on funding. So Mrs. Azogu, could you just know what's the role of financial regulators in ensuring that we have this enabling environment for financial inclusion, and that is created for financial inclusion? You know, are the regulators themselves, are they prepared? Are they even prepared for this changing landscape? You know, this energy mix we're talking about here today. What sort of capacity do they need when we're talking of things like public-private partnerships? You know, and those kind of transactions. Are they actually do they have the capacity for that? Maybe you could give us some perspective in that regard, Mrs. Azogu. You're on mute. You could yes.
Yes. Thank you, Pat. Funding, I mean, this is a very, it's a critical issue, because as we all know, we can speak all the grammar, have all the best of plans, but if we don't have the funding, then we run into problems. In the past and in recent times, I think we know that the focus has been on crude oil, I mean, major focus, and the funding has usually come from a mix of foreign investors and the government, particularly in most of the countries in Africa, it was like this, but Nigeria particularly. So you will see that a lot of the IOCs had JV arrangements and agreements with the government. And then so you had the funding moving in that direction. Then after some, well, not so long ago, you say about maybe 15 to 20 years ago, we began to move into what you call the production sharing agreements, whereby the foreign investors brought in the bulk of the investments, and the government benefited without investing a lot, because of course the burden on the government, it's a lot carrying the bulk of the ventures you had in the country. Now, like you rightly said, Pat, most of the, will I say, international oil companies are operating in jurisdictions where laws are now forcing them to move towards cleaner energy. So you will see that a lot of the companies and in the countries are repositioning themselves to clean energy. So most companies have launched transition kind of programs and mechanisms. So rightly said, funding is being directed towards these areas. Of course, it's a gradual process. Like Mr. Chikemusu said, you're going to go gradually. I know that there's a target for 2050 for I think most of the European arms. Now, the point is, with this kind of strategy, you begin to see that funding is getting tougher for us back home in Africa, in Nigeria. Then there are other factors that also contribute to the difficulties in funding from our part of the world. You have legislation. You hear this talk about PIB, everybody hears it. You have legislation that is not enabling the investors to take firm and maybe swift decisions on their funding. I can tell you that in the past few years, Nigeria, for instance, has lost a lot of investment by virtue of the fact that the enabling legislation has not been clearly defined for people to take investment decisions. You know that oil and gas activities are long-term, from the start of exploration to development. So you need to be sure that a particular number of years, you are more or less, you have certainty in the fiscal and maybe legislative regulations. So at the end of the day, all of these pose great challenges for us back home in speaking about lighting Africa, lighting Nigeria. We have to begin to make deliberate efforts in the area of funding. And I think that our financial institutions, I know in the past 10 years, they've been repositioning to participate, and they've been participating really in having the funding between maybe the private companies, even the multinationals, the government arm, and the financial institution. This will have to continue. But I think that the government role is going to still come in strong, because if you look at the funding available, the funding that can be generated internally, you find out that it's quite small to grow, to grow the industries we're talking about. We're talking about diverse energy developments into the future. So we are going to begin to look at the kind of partnerships, maybe financial institutions are going to think about fundings that will cut across jurisdictions. But one thing is for sure, the business has some positive profitability, because you know that investors are here to make money. So if you have an enabling environment, then we should be able to form such alliances. But I think that the government will have to play quite some key roles, particularly in the area of the renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. I don't know how much time we have left. Can we take the question from the floor? I mean, we literally had 3 things to talk about here, and we've only had like 45 minutes. So Choma said there was a question from the floor. I don't know. I can't see the question on my side. And if we can't, okay. So somebody asked, Toyosi Ebiti asked specifically, a specific Nigerian energy roadmap will do so much in so many sections, from helping building confidence with external and internal investors, stroke funding, national budget. I can't see the question there. Okay, so maybe it's a comment. I like to comment. So there are some comments. Do we have any questions? Okay, will Africa venture into carbon credit market? Will Africa venturing into the carbon credit market help light up Africa by selling carbon credits earned from renewable energy space? And Dolapo, can you take this question? Will Africa venturing into carbon credit markets, will they help light up Africa by selling carbon credits earned from renewable energy sources?
I think it's one of the things that could potentially grow or facilitate the growth of clean energy. It's obviously not a one size fits all or a silver bullet. There's the whole structure of the carbon markets itself worldwide, and looking at the commitment of governments, from Paris Agreement and all of that, to continue to foster that. So it's a how would I say it? It's Nigeria being in the middle of what is happening all over the world is one advantage that we can use in terms of funding and encouraging renewable energy, but it's not a silver bullet. It's just one of the incentives. It's one of the things that can help, but it's not a silver bullet.
Okay, thank you very much. I know we've run out of time. I think we have, Anita, but I'm just going to ask the panelists to please, in line with this year's theme, choose to challenge. Can we have your closing remarks on the decisive action and challenge to take? So we're going to start off with Peju, if you can give us the challenge for women.
If we're going to lift 100 million people out of poverty, women who form up to half of the population of Nigeria need to be encouraged, enabled, and fight to step up to the plate, to be part of policy and decision-making in both the public and the private sector. And I choose to challenge. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. Next, Chike, could you give us your own remark on this theme's, the year choose to challenge, your closing remark on the decisive actions and challenge to men? You come from the male perspective, please.
Yes, okay, so let me first start by saying I choose to challenge. And it's about men taking deliberate action to provide the support mechanism for women, not only to come into the industry, because that's important, and that's the Girl to STEM program, but also to sustain women at different levels in the industry, senior management, C-suite, CEOs. We need to have more women represented in those levels because it's important. Let me say one more thing. I would like to put forward an action going forward for WIEN, because nobody else has picked it up. We have a petroleum industry bill. It speaks to the fact that Nigeria is still thinking of petroleum as the energy of the future. We need WIN as an action to push forward with the support of men to have a renewable energy industry bill. It's about time.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. That's excellent, an excellent point there as well. I'm going to ask Mrs. Azogu if you can kindly give your own challenge and decisive action to corporations. And see what you can say.
Thank you so much, Pat. I think everybody desires industrialization. We desire economic growth. We desire that our children have jobs when they graduate. I think this is what it will translate to eventually, the growth we're talking about. We desire more energy so we can push the industrialization. And we desire policies that will lead us towards this direction. So I choose to challenge that women be given more role, deliberate action, that women be given more roles in governance and policy making in the country. I choose to challenge.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Azogu. Thank you so much. That was great. Finally, we're going to ask Dolapo, who's going to end us on a high note, and she's going to give us her closing remark on the decisive actions and challenge to government.
So for me, the decisive challenge to government is deliberateness. It's deliberateness in policy to ensure that women are in, from cradle to grave, as you said, are involved, in energy, increasing the diversity. And I would like to say that this challenge is actually not only to government, because the government needs private sector to be able to implement. What government's role is to put the policy in place in consultation with private sector. Private sector then goes on to implement. So my challenge today, and I would like to challenge the Women in Energy Network and the Renewable Energy Access Network as well, is for us to start to work towards a way that a sustainable way and an action plan for organizations to be able to support this building of this pipeline, whether it's for the schools, whether it's for the women at work who starts from entry level. How do you encourage her to stay through so that she can get through C-suite? There are many things about women that are very unique, and they are our blessings. And women have to be deliberately encouraged. Women bear children. There are times in their lives that they bear children, and they need to be encouraged to still stay in the workplace. It's the reason why we have these gaps. Let's be honest with ourselves. Let's try to, let's chart the pace, even in our organizations, and come out with something, that helps. I don't know, it's a structure, it's a policy that can be built on and that can be adapted by other organizations to be able to encourage women in technology, in science. We talk about corporates, but we should also be talking about teachers. We should also talk about the other people who feed this. If you don't have women who are teaching other children, I'm not even talking about only ladies now, it's a whole life cycle. I think that's one of the challenges. So from government to private sector, let's try to build this. Let's formulate that policy. And it's not exact, it can be ingrained in codified in law, but it's something that's adaptable for organizations. And I choose to challenge.
Thank you so much. I think we don't have any more time. We could have gone on for another hour. I know there's so much to say, but I'd just like to thank first and foremost the panelists, Mrs. Calista Azogu, Mrs. Dolapo Kukoyi, Mrs. Adepeju Adebajo, and Mr. Chike Wosu. Thank you so much it's been so informative, it's been so enlightening, it's been so exciting, great contributions and great action points that have come out of this that we can actually run with as Women Energy Network. I'd also like to thank our audience for sitting through patiently and listening and engaging, and for the questions that we received, and also for your comments as well. Some comments have also been posted. I hope we can take these comments on board when we're putting together the outcome of this symposium. So thank you very much. It's been great meeting you all, and great being the moderator for this session. Thank you, and have a wonderful day with the rest of the sessions that are coming up. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
A round of applause. Bye, everybody. And we all choose to challenge. All choose to challenge. Bye.
Thank you so much for a wonderful moderation.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all. Now the rooms are open. You can just kindly click on the room tab on the platform, then feel free to join any of the sections. Hello. So you can join any of the rooms, just feel free. If you find out that one of the rooms are filled up, please, you can join another room. Now the networking section has started. Hello. So now we'll move to the next section, which is the networking section. You kindly click on the room tab to be able to access the room. If one room is filled up, feel free to join another room. Thank you. And thank you for participating. The networking rooms are open now, so you can join. You can kindly put a question on the comment section if you have any issues. So we have rooms for the Arise and the Women FM. Please, you can kindly leave. This section is over and click on the next section, which is the networking section. Please, can everybody move to the networking section? You can either join the Arise room or the Women FM room. Please kindly switch.